The Competitive 40K Network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of this week's Art of War 40K podcast. Today we are joined by Arthur II, the main tactical coach for Team America. Arthur, how are you doing?
Doing great, Nick.
Awesome. Happy to have you. So basically, the role for the coach at the World Team Championships is one that you may not be familiar with, but it is integral to the team's success overall. And a coach in Warhammer is more than just someone who helps you get better in the off season before the tournament. And they're definitely more than someone who just like make sure your water bottle's full. The coach orchestrates the round, as I'd put it, and they are really the captain of the ship at a functional level when the actual captain is busy playing a game of Warhammer. So we're going to hear from Arthur, who's got a great overarching perspective on Team America. We're going to talk about the preparation leading up to the tournament, the months and months and months of grueling work, along with how we could improve that, our army comp, our selections with that, last minute twitches, all that good juicy details. And then, of course, on the ground at the World Team Championships, like what were the ebbs and flows and the pains and woes. Then in part two, we're going to go round by round through the actual tournament, all 7 rounds of the event from the perspective of the coach of Team USA, the story of how we got third place, what we can do better, and how we're going to do better in the future. Arthur, how are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, doing great. Looking forward to this. I think there'll be some spicy stories to tell.
I'm looking forward to it. I have not heard your perspective nearly enough on this, but whenever I hear you, it's like, Nick, I need to push, that's what I hear. But I'm really excited for this. So this is your first year with Team America from you entered in as the kind of get the academy in shape coach, whatever you want to call that. And your role evolved over the course of the year into this head coach tactical role. Talk to me about that and your experience with the team overall.
Yeah, like you mentioned, started the year as the academy coach. Well, actually, slightly before that, John approached me, asked me if I was going to join the if I wanted to apply for the academy this year. I didn't think that would probably be the right place for me, but he offered me the role of academy coach, and I'd done a lot of coaching and trying to get my team XPZ up to fairly good standards for team play. So that was a challenge that I was more than happy to take on.
Awesome. Right. So did you find this role for coaching to be a natural fit for you, or were you struggle to kind of fit into it yourself?
I think there was a lot of natural synergies with what I do in my regular life. I do a lot of team building. I do a lot of mentoring. Um, I I enjoy Warhammer. I enjoy the tactical parts of Warhammer. I had to do a lot of learning to go from kind of a singles player into a teams player, and I was more than happy to try to convey that over to the team and try to take a group of highly decorated singles academy players and turn them into a cohesive team.
Tell me a bit about yourself. Like, what qualifies you to be someone helping great Warhammer players get even better?
Well, I've been playing for a while now. Probably since the beginning of Eighth Edition. So right around Eighth Edition, my kids were going, starting school. I found myself a little more time, so I started playing competitively. I started joining tournaments, as that was the easiest way for me to get 3 solid games in a day. Started having some success with them. And then right, after COVID, the teams format started taking off, and that's when I really, really started taking a great interest in teams. Joined a great team, XPZ. We were highly interested in putting together a team for Challengers Cup back then. Really took the lead in pairings and matrixing and things like that, and we did fairly well. Lost a stat check. You were there as well, Nick. Yep, teaching me the reins of coaching, and that was a role that I really gravitated to.
Yeah, I think that was actually the first time I really got to know you, Arthur, I was actually coaching XPZ a little bit out of my normal role, but I had a blast coaching you guys. You were an excellent team and a lot of fun to just be around and be part of. So appreciate that still. And then
Yeah, great memories.
yeah, for sure. You don't do that every day. And then you were one of the people on the team, one of our stronger performers on the table, but also you were definitely like one of the leaders of XPC, right? And then I think it was very natural. You took an interest in kind of my role as the coach, and I feel like you helped to kind of push that into the culture of XPZ or like teams in general, just generally get involved. And I was really excited to see you as part of the Team America roster this year.
Yeah, thank you very much. As part of Team America, part of the academy coach, I really wanted to take a lead role in introducing a couple of concepts or ideas into the academy to help them level up from singles to coach to team play.
Cool. So, talk to me a little bit about your experience working with the Academy members in the earlier parts of the year, all the way up until I don't know, before we get into the WTC time, like as we're all just training up in the Academy. What were some of the challenges you have faced, and how do you actually train people to go from singles players that win their regions pretty effectively and maybe make a name for themselves at a super major here and there to world class players?
Yeah. So I think, as you mentioned, we're taking a group of highly decorated singles players, right? And we're trying to instill with them the values of Team USA as well as the skill sets that they're going to need in order to be successful at WTC. And each of these players are coming in with, different skill sets, different experiences, different ways in which they've become successful singles players. And we want them to keep some of that, but we also need them to understand that we're talking at a different level here, and different abilities need to be enhanced. So from the beginning, I tried to emphasize four things that we're going to practice, as part of Team USA. First priority is sportsmanship. As Team USA members, we are trying to keep a very high standard on the table, both in terms of being great opponents, as well as being great Warhammer players. We want to leave everyone with the impression that, it was a great game. They're happy to play us. They'd be happy to play us again, right? The second thing we try to emphasize is a culture of growth. As mentioned, all these players have skills that have gotten them to this level, right? But now they have to learn new skills, or they have to learn ways in which to apply those skills slightly differently. So we want them to take every game that they've played as part of Team USA, win or loss, and take something from that they can use to grow into the future. So then the third thing that we want to work on is very team specific, and that involves predictions and matrixing, right? For anyone who's done teams play, getting a matrix built for the teams that you think are going to be contenders is critical for your pairings team in order to know who to put into which positions. And then the other aspect is predictions during the round, right? You need to be able to give your coach an accurate prediction, or as accurate as you can, this being a dice game and all, of where you expect your game to end up, so that they can know where in the round they can go to push for more points or to hold for a safer score.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot of different skills, right? From just like individual singles play to teams play that, are more subtle and kind of habitual and behavioral, but also they're real skills to develop, like calling your shot and how your round is and controlling where on the matrix you're going to score and predicting that in and of itself. How were you able
yeah,
to like teach people that and kind of change the culture of a bunch of singles players to team players?
Yeah, I think the first thing you really have to emphasize and get into, kind of build into people's play habits, is the idea of keeping the diff score in mind. As a singles player, you're really looking for whether you win or lose a round, right? If you're losing a round, you want to take bigger risks to try to bring yourself back in the game. If you're winning the round, you want to play a take safer lines in order to secure your win, right? And that doesn't really apply to teams as much, right? In teams, what actually becomes much more important is what I like to call tempo, and that is how much of a risk you're taking in each turn in order to secure points or score more points. And in a team's play, that tempo is often dictated by what is going on, what the rest of the team needs, or what is going on around you in the round, as opposed to just how to secure the win.
Can you just explain on that more? That's fascinating.
Yeah, sure. So, as an example, right? if you are a slow tempo army or playing a slow tempo game, you're generally playing more conservative. You're holding back. You're saying, hey, if my enemy wants to hit me, they have to overextend. Maybe I'm scoring more points. Maybe I'm scoring fewer points at the beginning, right? But I'm keeping my material safer for a later game, right? Generally, that leads to more even scores because nobody is blowing each other out early. In so which if someone gets blown out early, that's usually what leads to bigger scores near the end when they have a bunch of units running around and all they have to do is score points, right? If you're trying for a higher tempo game, you're going more aggressive, you're pushing your models forward, you're saying, let's fight right now, because hopefully because you think you have an advantage in that fight, right? And that leads to a more volatile game. But at the end of it, whoever has more material is going to score more points because they have more rounds to to just rack up those primary and secondary points, right? So a lot of teams play, and what people have to learn is playing at different tempos than what they're used to, because players will naturally gravitate to a certain tempo that they have that they're more experienced in, whether they are a pressure rushing army, whether they are a more conservative army, or whether they're somewhere in between, more of a tradey style game, right? And one of the more advanced aspects of team play is being able to play at different tempos than what's natural for your army, depending on what the opposing army you're facing dictates or what the coaching staff dictates as necessary for the round.
How much of it do you think is put like team success on pairings and landing the right armies into the right armies and making the right composition versus players learning these teams nuances? We're all just great Warhammer players inherently, but there's a level of organizing us to be a cohesive team on the table, despite the fact that it's 8 individual games. That's kind of your role with the whole thing, Arthur, is like the coach lead on that. How much was it
Yeah,
army and pairings versus the team play aspect of it?
yeah. It's hard to land a direct percentage on there. I'd say, if I have to pull something out of my head, I would say probably 50-50.
Sure.
But what happens is, you have your matrix of what you have team comp in terms of building the best armies that you can and bringing them to the table, right? You have pairings in terms of getting them to the right matchups, right? And then you have this tempo idea of playing the right matchups in the right way, right? If you're in a disadvantaged matchup, but you know how to play a slow tempo there and play very defensive, that means their opposing army can't push into yours so that you can score even a lower score that might help your team take it over the edge, right? It's also important to be able to know how to switch tempo in the middle of the game, because you might be able to play a slower tempo at the beginning, but then you see how the round is going and you get that push call, and you need to be able to switch on a dime and attack and try to make it a more volatile game to get those points. Um, when you are just building for a singles game, you're not necessarily in that mindset of making sure your army can change or play those different tempo types of games. But in a team play, it becomes much more critical.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. So they're all kind of it's intertwined as different phases of the game. Kind of like you have to play all 5 turns of a game. You have to play all the different phases of a round. Any given turn could be the turn you lose, or any given aspect of it could be an area you could get right or get wrong. And interdimensional team play through tables and coordinating, slowing it down as you put it, to make the loss not so bad, or speeding it up to make up for a different table that's going extra poorly. That's a challenging nuance, which I think ultimately separates the top teams from a lot of the other teams in the room. Arthur, with respect to kind of like our team composition leading up to it, how did you find our process for coming up with our armies? And were you concerned as someone who's never been here before and doing that, or what was your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a very eye-opening experience being part of Team USA, and seeing the team composition aspect of it come to life. Um, as a whole, I would say Team USA builds very, I would say, resilient compositions. Right? We like to have um, armies in the list that have very few bad matchups into the meta, right? So going into the rounds, going into the team building aspect, we're looking at what the big top dogs are going to be in the meta. Obviously, it was going to be knights. We were checking for T-Suns. We were worried about Emperor's Children a little bit, and then we're making sure that our armies, for the most part, are not vulnerable to those types of builds. And then in that context, we're trying to find who can specialize at what, and then who can build to kind of attack or pin those scenarios. So it was a lot of work. I was highly impressed by the amount of conversations, the amount of practice, the amount of exploration, experimentation happening with all the starters and the academy. A lot of advisors also were brought in to help plan for different matchups and things like that. It was very eye opening, and I was very pleased in a lot of ways with what we came out with.
That's awesome. I mean, did you find that we were on the right end of some calls you made? Like we were the only tier one nation to bring Emperor's Children. And obviously, attached to that Emperor's Children is John, so it kind of that's up to him, I guess. But we also didn't bring any Knights or Chaos Knights. How was your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of some of the thinking that has to go in, and it actually ties a little bit into what I was talking about before with the tempo. We debated Chaos Knights. Oh, sorry, we debated Knights in general for a long time, and it was honestly like right up to like 12 hours before list submission that we were still considering taking Knights. I think ultimately we ended up on the right position on that, and the reason for that is because um, Knights in general play a very play a very efficient game, right? But they have very few tools in terms of controlling tempo, like I was talking about earlier, right? If you bring a knight list, especially a knight list with a lot of big knights, right? Generally, what's going to happen is, maybe there's some turns in which you're caging, maybe some turns where you're staging, but at some point, you are going to have to stat check that opposing army, right? You're going to have to put some of your big knights forward, and they're going to hit you with what they have, right? And the nature of knights in this meta right now means that when they hit you, as when the opposing player hits the knight player, there's a chance they just whiff, right? The knight stat lines just mean that there is a chance that, with their high toughness, with their invulnerable saves, that everything flubs. And on Team USA, we had a policy of, hey, if you are going into a knight and you flub on their go turn, it is not your fault for returning something lower than a matrix, right? That's just something that can happen with knights as it stands. Conversely, though, if you are the knight player and you just have to go in, you have less agency to control the outcome of that than if you had a lot more pieces to control. You can't control the tempo as well of what happens. You just have to go in, and if you flub your saves, then suddenly you're on the back foot. You have no control over how the other person's pushing into you, right? So as a team with a lot of experienced players, that's a very scary prospect to be in, where you just kind of like I have to push my stuff forward and hope I make my saves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's personally why I don't like Knights on the team. I find like exactly what you said. They don't control tempo well. They have to play the game at whatever tempo Knights play games at. Here's my big stompy robots. And then I often find Knights at WTC getting themselves into Eldar matchups of some horrible matchups, whatever it might be. And then six big Knights are on the back line, not on an objective, not being a Knight army. And I'm like, why did you even do this to yourselves? So I no regrets on that choice to not bring Knights or Chaos Knights. One thing that you said that struck out to me in that explanation was how knights are not good at controlling tempo, and a lot of our armies are very interested in controlling tempo. And that kind of brings me back to what you had said earlier about tempo control and learning that as a concept in Warhammer is really what the Team America Academy kind of teaches as one of the skills. I'm trying to wrap my head around this because this is not a concept that I actually think about much, but I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Um, Tempo control as an army archetype, what is that? And is that something we did inadvertently, or would you say on purpose? Like, what's your take on that?
I think it's something that naturally happens as you develop your Warhammer skills, right? Um, and I don't think it's something that is necessarily consciously built in as much. But when you are a player that's played a lot of games and you've lost a lot of games, you can naturally get a sense that you won or lost this game sometimes because of tempo. you went in too early. You took a too aggressive a line at the beginning, right? And maybe you burned out, and then your opponent caught up and score, right? Or you took too passive a line early, and your opponent got most of the board, and then you weren't able to come back in time. Or you went in one turn too late, something like that. You took bad trades, things like that. You lost the right material because you were forced into action. And these are things that I think a lot of players on Team USA understand natively. A lot of players coming in have a natural tempo pace that they like to play at. We can call them pushers, we can call them aggressive, we can call them more cagey, we can call them blunters. But it's being able to play at a different tempo than expected and identifying the correct tempo to play a game at that is kind of part of the relation between the coach and the player and all the training and matchup data that player has into that particular game. I could give like an example of that if that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, so if I were to give an example of that of what I think, right? Let's say Anthony Vanille, right? He plays world leaders. World leaders in general, in the hands of most players, are I go rush you, crush you, turn one, you know, kill all your models, and then see how it goes from there, right? That's the ideal world leader play style. I love that kind of play style as well a lot of times. But what can sometimes separate Anthony from a lot of other plural leader players is he knows how to stage or go in a turn later, or he knows how to time his go turns so that his opponent has very few turns to come back. Even if he's going to lose the trades of material, his opponent has fewer turns to come back and get the score back around, right? I would also say John Lennon is excellent, especially with his Emperor's Children army. He's excellent at controlling and anticipating all levels of tempo in a game. He knows how to play defensively, but the army also has enough speed to go all in when he has to. So an opponent kind of facing that often ends up saying, well, if I stay back, I'm going to lose, right? If I go forward, I'm going to lose. I just have to pick the worst option there and then hope it comes out all right.
Right. And part of those choices, there's no World Leaders Army, to my knowledge, that looks like Anthony's in WTC. I mean, and there's very few EC armies in the entire thing for John. Is like, we're letting the players be players here. John's Emperor's Children is John's Emperor's Children, and Anthony's World Leaders is Anthony's World Leaders. And that was kind of one of the mantras Team USA used to select its factions throughout the year and for its final roster, as opposed to picking meta armies and like shifting one of these players off of that to Imperial Knights, to Chaos Knights, or to whatever it might have been. Were you in favor of that as the coach, Arthur, or do you think we maybe could have benefited more from some more meta picks?
I think in general, I was a fan of how we did things. I think you can always second guess kind of like what the pieces that you take in certain examples, especially after you've seen the list that come out. But I think there's always if you have two armies that are equal in strength in the matrix, right? But one is a known quantity and one is an unknown quantity for your opponents. You want the unknown quantity because that introduces some element of mismatching or mispairing on the opposing side, right? And it just becomes a level of how much you value that. I think John bringing the Emperor's Children army, Emperor's Children being somewhat of a known quantity in a lot of ways, but he's thrown the Mauler Fiends in there. People aren't quite experienced at how John plays it. I think that was the right call as opposed to putting John on something like Knights or something a little more straightforward that is easy to matrix. And I think when you look at how the rounds played out, a lot of that validates kind of our choice in bringing something slightly off the wall.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, retrospectively, look at the scores. Like, okay, that was a great call. But I will admit, walking into Night World with Emperor's Children was scary.
Absolutely.
So when we're there and, at the actual event, every plan is great until it makes first contact, right? Something like that. So what changed? What was your experience day of at the tournament, now actually coaching Team America?
Yeah, I think a lot of the focus on the early days in the pod stage, was on communication, because we can theory craft a lot of how we want the coaches to talk to the players, but once we were there, going through the rounds, we had to change. We had a great team of coaches with us. We had Stephen Corrales and Dan and Tyler Bortel, and Brandon and Josh, and we all had kind of slightly different duties and things like that. But in terms of picking the right cadence to talk to the players, that was something we had to work out a little bit in the pod stage, right? Um, and also, a lot of players were used to playing the singles games. They weren't quite as used to giving updates to the coaching staff in the middle of the round, and trying to keep that projection up to date, that group round projection up to date, in order for us to know where to push and where to hold. Um,
Yeah, one of the challenges we experience is that it's so hard to get us all in the same room together physically all throughout the year, right? We're all across America and in different places, and we have jobs and whatnot. And then when we get to Europe, a lot of those small details that you miss, like round in real time cohesion, I definitely felt like, oh man, we never really practiced that. And I'm glad we were able to kind of work it out in the early days. I think that's definitely true. What about towards the second half? When we played against France, Germany, and then beyond that, Austria and Poland. It was the tournament definitely ramped up in intensity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think in those rounds, I could really feel the importance of both being on the same page as the player. I could feel the trust of the players, which was really appreciated, and I can see kind of it really blossomed to me how useful a tactical coach is in that role. So, a lot of times, I was able to go to tables. I was able to look at the game state, right, and then just ask the player a quick question for their projection, and then from there, I can get a sense of what the round needs from that player. Um, a lot of times, and maybe we'll get into this in part two, but a lot of the later rounds started with lower projections, of what was going to happen. And we had to kind of claw our way back. And we had to pick and choose some places in which to take some risks. Sometimes those panned out, sometimes those didn't. And then we had to adjust as we go. And being able to look at boards and identify which players can take those risks, and what timing to allocate that risk was important. One other critical thing that kind of dawned on me as we were going through is certain rounds in which we were slightly ahead. Um, I was able to anticipate when the other team would have to start pushing against us, right? So in those scenarios, I was able to tell some of our players, "Hey, you sit back and wait one round. He's going to get a push order, and then he's going to have to take risks, and you're going to be able to capitalize on that right after." So it often ends up in some matchups kind of where they're stalemated and looking at each other, which side is going to have to blink first, right? And being able to read that scenario coming was a good contributor to some of the scores that we got.
Yeah, definitely. So I love how you kind of were able to read the other opponent's moves based on how our round projection was going, which both means that you and the opposing team were in alignment with America's winning or whatever. In this case, like you were able to anticipate even like they're probably going to push soon, and you can communicate this. I think you did in my game. Like I asked you, should I send it or should I chill? And you were like, just chill out for now. And then surely enough, they sent it upon me, and life got much easier because now, like you said, they blinked in the staring contest, and that's the kind of intercommunication that I think really I was trying to get at earlier separates the top teams from the less, and I don't mean less experienced. I mean like not top 5, 6 teams in the world here. Um, even
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I mean, absolutely. And if you look at some of the results, I mean, I think we finished ahead of Sweden by maybe 4 points, right? In terms
Yeah,
of
it
podium,
was it
getting the
was
podium,
neck and neck. Yeah,
right? Yeah. And like 4 diff points across 7 rounds is a very small differential, right? And,
that's
you know,
56 games, right?
yeah. And sometimes being able to make that call sometimes of you sit back and wait, or you have to go aggressive and net this point, right? You know, that can make the difference between podium and not in a lot of
Uh,
scenarios.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you know you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of dice. I've had a unique position of being both a player in certain years for Team America and also the coach for Team America. And I know that they are both incredibly stressful and difficult in their own ways. As a coach, you have a lot of pressures, the whole round on your shoulders in a lot of ways, and you can see the train crashing in very slow, real time when it's not going well, and you're trying everything you can to kind of deal with it. How did you manage the pressure and the stress of it all, and how did you find that?
Well, I think I think it is a lot of pressure, but it's playing in high profile events and things like that. You get a little bit used to the pressure, right? Kind of the same as playing on a final table, but slightly different in terms of now you've got a lot of people resting on a lot of people, a lot of people's rounds depending on you as well, right? I was lucky. John and I had a chat, beforehand, and it was a lot of, hey, do you want me to come to you for a lot of these decisions? And John was very frank. He was like, no, I would like to focus on my game. I trust you to make these decisions, call in round. That was very appreciated. So knowing that I had the team, behind me on my calls, took a load off. And seeing the stress everyone was under just trying to execute their rounds, um, helped me kind of not be alone in that aspect, if that makes sense, right? We're all
Right.
under a lot of pressure to perform. It's pressure that we enjoy as highly skilled Warhammer players that seek out this type of high level competition, right? So in a lot of ways, we're having fun while we're being under the lights.
Yeah, and I think having that inter-team trust is like a critical necessity for the coach. I mean, if you're just giving orders and updates and people aren't trusting that and aren't trusting your ability to read that, like, what are we doing here? Someone has to be that person.
Yeah, I think it was a big emphasis in Team USA this year. That we are there for each other as well. Mistakes are going to happen. Just in terms of the number of decisions every player, every coach has to make in a given round, you can't get 100% correct, right? Somebody's going to make a mistake at some point. Um, and as long as we know we all have each other's backs, and I think that helps carry us through that.
Yeah, there were no bad apples on the team, and I loved that. It was very much like we all made mistakes at various points in this tournament. We got bloodied and bruised, every single one of us at various points, and no one made anyone else feel bad, really, from what I could tell. It was very much like it's okay.
Yeah, that just goes back to that kind of growth mentality that I mentioned before, right? You make a mistake in a game, you take that with you, you learn from it, you grow and just carry that forward into the tournament as well.
So now I'm gonna have to ask the tough questions. Of course, we did very well. We got third place, and I'm very happy with that and the fancy shiny ring that comes with it. But there's always room for improvement, Arthur. And now that we have the benefit of hindsight and retrospect, there's so many areas to examine, right? On the table, gamesmanship and play, like the pairings, the army composition, the interpersonal coaching interactions during the rounds. Something else I haven't even mentioned, practicing. Where do you think we messed up along the way, and how could we do better?
I think messed up is a strong word. I think when you look at the standings, we are right up there, right? I think I think in my mind we're right up there with Germany and Sweden, right, as kind of contenders for that podium. I think as evidence from the results, I think France is a slight cut above, right, and we're playing a little bit of catch up there. But I think there are aspects in many areas that we could learn and improve. Now, that's not to say we're not world class as it stands, but there's that couple of percentage points that we can do better. And in my mind, some of that is coaching, right? Some of that are things that I would like to improve in terms of communication and preparation. This was my first year for WTC. I took back a lot of that for things that we can improve on next year. There's some things in the academy process, other things that I would like to emphasize a little more on tempo and learning to play different styles from what might be expected to be able to introduce a wrinkle to the pairings matchup, right? And then I think we can improve a little bit in our pairings in our team composition. I think there's a lot of effort thrown into areas of optimization that we might be able to tweak and do a little differently.
Wow. It's I love the answer. I think it was very complete and honest in the fact that, there's so many areas of improvement. And I appreciate you keeping me humble and the fact that I used the word messed up. We did do very well, and I want to be very grateful for that. I'm just there's that competitor in me, Arthur. I can't shake it that wants to get that win off France. You know how it is.
Oh, absolutely. I want to beat them as well next year. I want to give them a good challenge. But I have to be realistic. We fell short, but that's part of your growth as a Warhammer player.
Yeah. Now, one thing I need to call you out on here is you did not mention our on the table play as an area we could improve. And, as much as I would love to let that go to my head, I know that's not true. So, how do we take it even further on the board? What does that look like?
I think I think there are elements of team composition and and personal bias that we can try to expand upon in terms of play, right? And since you're wanting to get called, it almost feels like you're wanting to get called out here, Nick. But I think no, I think what we what I would have liked to have seen sometimes is a little more ability to play the different lines, right? Let's call it like that. And that sometimes comes into team comp. So that sometimes comes into practice, right? Um,
I see
when
what you're
you
saying. Like, not play a matchup the one specific way you know how to play the matchup, but learn like three or four different ways to approach it.
Exactly, yeah, and that's very difficult in terms of the amount of practice that we have. We don't have unlimited practice. We have to practice a lot of things, right? But I think if we can focus in on some key matchups, and some of that involves assigning more specific roles to players, um, that will allow you to know kind of which matchups you need to focus on, right? Then we can start. Then we can think about different ways of how we can approach that matchup, and also different ways how the opponent can approach that matchup, which can potentially mess us over,
No, I
right?
love that answer, and I'm really grateful that you kind of shared that insights with me because I think once you get so close, it's hard to kind of coach the coach, right? I know how to pilot, I know how to consolidate. These tactics are not lost upon me, and how to make the most out of the small units I have. And the macro strategy is something we talk about largely at group scale, like how do we approach the matchup. But I think it's line exploration and taking uncomfortable lines is a great way to improve at this level. And that's really what the core of this podcast and Art of War is all about, is like constantly trying to learn and improve and get better at the game. So I don't want to exempt myself from the lessons I could learn from defeat here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's very difficult also because this is something that only happens, I don't say only happens, but largely happens at the very high levels of play, right? When you and an opponent both stare at each other and okay, if we play this standard, like how we like to play this matchup, how it's most efficient for us to play this matchup, so and so is going to lose, right? So one player has to turn it on its head. And the player that knows and has practiced how to turn it on its head has that advantage in that different board state, right? And introducing a bit more of those wrinkles into the team is something that I'd like to explore going into next year.
I think one of the things we did as a team was at the start of the game, we all know what we matrixed as the score, and that was then the goal, more or less, until told otherwise. And I think within that, there's room to be like fluctuating, I suppose. Rather than us just default to whatever the matrix score was, we could have you as the director essentially be like, all right, I want to see some more points out of Nick right off the bat. So I'm thinking during deployment, I'm not aiming for a 10, I'm aiming for a 12 or 13. That can be baked into the plan at the creation of it instead of like in the middle of it. But that is a hard place to be, making those kinds of calls early.
Yeah, and this is something that requires a little more coordination between kind of the pairings team and the coaches team and all the players at the beginning. And there's a lot of areas for us to help each other understand the goals of the player and of the coaches a little better, and that's just something we're going to keep improving on.
Oh, we have a endless list of things we can keep improving on. What was the thing that you think we did really well as a team that got us to third place?
I think actually on the table we were very methodical. I think we played very well into the teams that played more standard Warhammer. So we brought good lists to counter the meta. We played them well. We executed our game plan well. Right. It's only the scenarios in which we ran into a wrinkle that we didn't have quite as much flexibility to adjust. That is something that I'd like to see us improve on.
That's a great take, and I think you can see it in both our results and the final standings. Right, first place is France. They had an off-meta weird comp, and we played them. It was not anything like what we had planned for in the broader scale of the meta, and then we had to kind of on the fly do a lot of it, and it didn't work out for us. And then against Germany, it did. We did win that round by a point. However, Germany got second place, is why I bring it up to our third. And part of that is tiebreakers and how it just shakes out. But also, Germany brought what I would say is one of the most unorthodox double knight comps. They had one of the only demon armies there. They had one of the only Drukhari armies there. And in a lot of ways,
Shadow Legion as well.
Shadow Legion. So I think those teams that recognized the meta, made a plan to just beat the meta, and then had those wrinkles were the ones vying for the top spots. And I believe Sweden also had some very unique picks like Demon Kint, for example. And I know Poland had some interesting picks too. And that's really the top 5 for this one. And then it was kind of this own mini, I don't want to say mini tournament. There were a lot of other teams in contention here, but amongst the top 5, we all had our own unique individualities as opposed to just the meta picks. And I think it was largely a battle of the unknown versus the unknown.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, we got very good at doing our matrix, playing the meta. We got third place on the backs of a lot of good rounds against opponents, but then against the ones that were also kind of doing slightly off tech, we didn't have quite as many pivots as I would have liked.
Right. I think we could have done a better job preparing for the unexpected than the expected. And that's obviously super hard to do, and hindsight sucks like that. But that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Arthur. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting your insights on Team America, your part of it, and how we could have improved and how we did really well at WTC.
Thanks, Nick. That was a great conversation.
Awesome. Listeners, check out part 2. That's where we're going to go round by round by round. Arthur's going to tell the story of the pushes, the losses, the unexpected twists and turns. You can subscribe right now on patreon.com/AOW40K. You get access to this episode, over 300 other episodes, all the part 2s to them, and a Discord server where you can talk to some of these amazing players that are on Team USA or just in the Art of War community. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll catch you later.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. The Art of War 40K.com.